is up, DW Nation? I am back after a week I've been gone. I was out celebrating my best friend's bachelor celebration, and it was insane. I had a great time, and we all did. But I am back here for the AEW recap. A huge week this past week. We saw the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega in action against Matt Sydal. We saw a huge debut of the first match of the Pinnacle since they've been newly formed NJF's stable. And then we also got a huge main event where it was a TNT Championship match where Darby Allin defended against a member of the Dark Order. So without further ado, I am Kevin Jones of Disciples of Wrestling, and let's get down to it. Starting off AEW, where we get Kenny Omega versus Matt Sydal, where if Matt Sydal wins, he's next in line for the AEW Championship. So this was a nice feeling out process as both men traded holds starting off, but we see Kenny Omega get a nice elbow strike as he rebounds Matt Sydal off the ropes. Now, as we get into this, we actually see Matt Sydal's quickness and speed end up being overwhelming for Kenny Omega, taking Kenny Omega out of the ring for Kenny to regroup, really. And as we come back from commercial break, we see Kenny focusing on Matt Sydal's left arm all up until Sydal hits a huge leaping Hurricane Rana, knocking Kenny off the top rope as he was looking to get in some offense. Now, Kenny ends up taking control again as he hits a huge apron back suplex, and he also hits a nice backbreaker for a near fall. We also saw some more great offense in as Matt Sydal goes for another nice Hurricane Rana. But we actually see Kenny Omega catch Matt Sydal as he went for the Meteora into a corner buckle bomb. And we actually see these two go head to head again as we see Kenny, after the buckle bomb, go into the V-trigger, and as he goes up for the one-winged angel, we see Matt Sydal hit a nice reverse Kanrana, and then we also see that go into a near fall. But as Matt Sydal looks to get in the 450, we see Kenny get in a nice reversal, pulling the top rope down, going into a huge V-trigger, coming off of the top rope, and as he sets up for the one-winged angel again, we actually see Matt Sydal go for the victory roll-up, but Kenny gets out of this, goes for another V-trigger, which is the third into the one-winged angel for a huge win for Kenny Omega. So the second match of the night is Hangman Adam Page versus Cesar Bononi. And as we start off the match, we see Hangman really aim to dodge a lot of Cesar's moves, as Cesar is a humongous guy, and Hangman really doesn't want any bit of this, as he's not used to not being the powerhouse in the match. But we actually see Cesar catch him as Hangman was going for an outside dive, and he hits a huge power slam onto the apron. But we end up seeing Hangman start to come back as he's looking to chop the big man down and hits a nice exploder suplex. And this goes into the buckshot lariat for a nice win for Hangman as he continues to be on his roll. Next up, we see a promo from Lance Archer as he talks about the interrupting of the Sting from these past few weeks. He says flat out that Sting is a legend, and if it wasn't for the icon, there would be no Murder Hog Monster, there would be no Lance Archer. But he says it was his time back then, but it is now Lance Archer's time now, and it's only a matter of time, and it will be showtime when it's time for these two to collide one-on-one head-on. Right after the promo, we end up getting Tony Schiavone interviewing his best friend, Miss Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and she's, of course, reigned with boos even after the great match she put on last week. But she flat out says she doesn't need the admiration of everybody to declare her as a top wrestler in AEW, as she's been the anchor for AEW's women's division since the entire company started. And she feels disrespected that Thunder Rosa even thinks that she's the one that put the AEW's women's division on the map. And she then goes on to say that while Tony Khan is looking for all these legends left and right, he's got one in the making right under his nose, even talking about the thumbs up for Mick Foley and throwing a jab at him, saying what took you 20 years to become the hardcore legend took me one match to stake my claim as a hardcore legend. And then flat out said, of course, AEW wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for the most important 3 letters in wrestling, which is DMD, as she goes off to the backstage area. Now, right before the match, we see the Varsity Blondes and Dante Martin chatting it up with Christian. Of course, we see Sasha come up, and she asks them, of course, what they're talking about, and Christian say he's giving a few pointers to the boys ahead of their match. And as this is going on, we see Frankie Kazarian approach Christian, and he flat out says, hey, how have you been here for this few weeks and haven't even talked to an old buddy? And of course, Christian is getting defensive about this, but Frankie goes straight to the shirt that Christian's wearing where it says outwork everyone. And he says, I mean, I like the catchphrase, but when are you going to start to do the work part? And Christian says, you know what? Next week is going to be my in-ring debut. I don't have a person that I'm wrestling yet. So how about next week is me versus you? And then, of course, now it's official, and it was made official later on, as next week we will see Christian Cage make his AEW in-ring debut against Frankie Kazarian. So the next match we end up seeing is, of course, the Varsity Blondes and Dante Martin versus the Pinnacles, FTR and Shawn Spears. Now, in the beginning, the Blondes and Martin had all the offense and actually overwhelmed the Pinnacle as they go outside the ring to regroup with Tully Blanchard. And of course, when it looks like all those 3 want to hit an outside dive, we see Wardlow get in the way and make the 3 reconsider. And now, going into the break, of course, we see these guys get some coaching from Tully Blanchard and MJF. And coming out, we actually see these guys dominate as Dax Harwood hits a nice brain buster on Dante Martin. And then, of course, they tag in Shawn Spears, and FTR clears the ring of the rest of the members of the other team. And then, of course, Shawn Spears hits the C4 for a huge win for the Pinnacle as a debut for them as a group. I mean, it was nice. And then after the match, we actually see Tony Schiavone interview the Pinnacle for the first time as Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler talk about Santana and Ortiz and say, this isn't the kiddie pool. We aren't here to make jokes. And of course, everyone looks at you guys as the top tag team, but we see through you guys. And then we go straight to MJF, and he talks about why Jericho and the Inner Circle haven't been there and says they've been afraid. And as, of course, Tony Schiavone starts to point out the fact that, you know, they just took out the Inner Circle not too long ago. We see Wardlow shut them up. And, of course, this is beautiful work by these guys. And I'm super glad to see that MJF is really getting taken to the top. I mean, this guy has been phenomenal as an anchor for AEW in the promo realm and just been a top face for the up-and-comers. But it's nice to see that he's getting the lead in a group and really seeing him being treated serious as a main event talent. Once we come from break, actually, we see QT Marshall as he's getting interviewed by Tony Schiavone. QT talks about how he's tired of being known as the backup man or just Cody's best friend. He's just tired of it and talks about how he's done with Cody getting all the showtime and all the spotlight without QT even getting a little bit of shine at all. And really him doing a lot of the background grunt work for Cody. And as he's talking about this, he actually comes up with the proposition of having an exhibition with Cody next week to really just stake his claim as a single star. And of course, as he's talking about this, we see Cody Rhodes come out from his executive position in Gorilla, and he has a sling on his left arm, as of course this has had damage on since Revolution. But Cody comes out and says, you know, I'm not looking to hurt you. I don't want to be in this match with you. And even with us in this match, I'm going to be pulling my punches because you're best friend to me. And of course, Cody says, but overall, I accept your exhibition. And he says that Arn Anderson will be the guest referee. So next week, we're officially getting Cody Rhodes versus QT Marshall with Arn Anderson as the guest ref. So this next match was Laredo Kid and the Lucha Bros versus Brandon Cutler and the Young Bucks. Now, this was a phenomenal match, beautiful work of art, very, very fast paced. So fast paced that I couldn't even get into all my notes like I needed to. But I will break this down to you guys the best I possibly can. So we start off the match with Nick Jackson versus Rey Fenix. These two go hold for hold to the point where we even see these two kip up at the same time, being face to face, being dead even. So we see the older brothers get tagged in with Penta L0M getting tagged in and Mac Jackson. And these two go hold for hold and even go in submission for submission. And they are dead even. So we see Brandon Cutler and we see Laredo Kid get tagged in. This was a completely different story, as we actually see Laredo Kid was too much for Brandon Cutler, to the point where we even saw the Young Bucks get involved to help out Brandon Cutler, because, I mean, he just couldn't do nothing with Kid. So we actually see, as they get involved, we see Ray Phoenix get involved with a nice springboard arm drag on the Bucks, leading up to a nice outside tope suicida from Pentagon. And then we actually see when Ray goes for an outside dive, we see he gets stopped in his tracks by Brandon Cutler, who ends up hitting a nice springboard elbow on Phoenix, and then that hits a nice springboard moonsault on Penta and Laredo Kid outside the ring. Now, as this is going on, we actually see Laredo Kid sneak his way up as the Young Bucks were congratulating Brandon Cutler for hitting a nice move. We actually see Laredo Kid hit a nice backflip on the Young Bucks and Cutler. And then going into the break, we actually see the Young Bucks end up starting to take control of Laredo Kid again. But as we come back from break, we actually see the Lucha Bros hit stereo super kicks on the Young Bucks, leading to Ray Phoenix setting up Laredo Kid with a nice springboard moonsault on, springboard Hurricane Rana on Nick Jackson, leading into a tag in on Penta to hit a nice dive onto Nick Jackson. Now, as this is going on, we actually see a near fall, but we also see a lot of things happen. We see bodies start to fly, and then in our ending sequence, we actually see Nick Jackson hit his phenomenal corkscrew dive as he sets up the finish for Brandon Cutler. And we also see Ray Phoenix hit a nice outside dive on Mac Jackson. But we end up seeing, as Brandon Cutler's looking to set up for his finisher, we actually see Laredo Kid spring his way up to the top rope and hit a nice Spanish fly for the finish. Now, after the match, we see Kenny Omega rushing out with the AEW Championship and knocking out Laredo Kid. It leaves the Young Bucks confused. And, of course, Kenny Omega goes back and takes them back down memory lane with a promo. It says 3 years ago, when Kenny Omega had the option to go anywhere. His contract had ended with New Japan Pro Wrestling. The Bucks had ended with ROH. So they had options. They had WWE. They had Ring of Honor. They had New Japan to go back to. But ultimately, Kenny decided to take his ball and just bet himself with the Young Bucks and kept it there. And then, of course, that's when they decided to bet on their vision and change up the wrestling landscape with All Elite Wrestling. Now, of course, that means that Kenny's extremely upset. He said, first, you guys did what you did to me last week. And now you guys decided to pick Brandon Cutler, out of all people, instead of your best friend, Kenny Omega. And he says, we're going to play this back one more time, and holds up the too sweet. And he flat out says, this is the last chance. And this leaves the Bucks to be more confused. And he goes, you guys are either with me or you're not. And of course, we see the Young Bucks decline and they walk out of the ring. And this leaves Kenny upset, but it also leaves him with the Lucha Bros behind him. We see Ray Phoenix set him up with a package pile driver leading up for Penta L0M to do the stomp. And it leaves, of course, Kenny left out on the ring. And then leaves, of course, the Lucha Bros and Laredo Kid to go backstage. And, of course, last minute, as always, we see the Good Brothers come out and give aid to Kenny Omega. And, you know, in the feel of the whole feud, you know, next up we actually have a backstage segment with Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. Now, of course, you see Eddie Kingston, he has a fractured ankle now from what the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega did to them last week by actually wedging his ankle into a steel chair and then just stomping on it from Carl Anderson on the middle rope. And then, of course, when they tried to set up Mox, we actually saw Young Bucks come out. And then this is when Mox starts to talk about this warning. He says, you guys keep doing this. You guys keep barking up this wrong tree over here. But the Young Bucks, I don't know you, so I don't trust you, and I don't like you. But since I owe you one, if you guys are looking to get in this fight, just know you're getting into a war, so you need to be ready to fight. And, of course, that means that now John is sending a nice little message to the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega, saying that it's looking like this is either going to be the Young Bucks and Mox and Kingston against you boys, or this is going to be a nice little three-way dance that we're going to get. So next up, we get women's action as we get a run back from the AEW Women's Championship Eliminators Tournament as we get Ty Conti versus Miss Nyla Rose. Now, in the beginning of the match, we actually see the Dark Order come out and give their support for Miss Ty Conti. But we actually see in the beginning of the match, Nyla Rose just dominates. I mean, she's dominating this poor little girl, and she even sets her up on the top rope for this draping, diving knee strike going into the commercial break. Now, as we get back from the commercial break, we actually see Ty Conti taking some control as she hits in some nice running knee strikes into the corner on Nyla, and then hits a nice pump knee strike on the apron. Now, this ends up bringing in a nice pump kick from Ty Conti for her to actually get a huge clothesline by Nyla Rose. Now, we end up seeing nice offense from Miss Ty Conti, leading up to the DD tie for the win. Now, after the match, while Ty Conti celebrating, we see Vicky Guerrero sweep this little girl's legs off the middle rope, and we see Nyla Rose start to beat her up, and as Nyla goes for her nice little beast bite, we actually see Miss Hikaru Shida come out with her kendo stick, and she hits Miss Nyla Rose on the back. And as this is going on, with Shida coming out for the rescue, we see the Bunny come out. Of course, she's accompanied by Matt Hardy and the Butcher and the Blade. And now she cleans house as she hits the kendo stick on Hikaru Shida and Ty Conti. And she goes up to the stage, and Matt Hardy's saying the AEW Women's Eliminators Tournament would have been a completely different story if Miss the Bunny was in it. And he now says that his client will be now staking her claim in the AEW's women's division. Now it's time for the main event. It is for the TNT Championship as we have challenger Mr. John Silver representing the Dark Order versus the TNT champion himself, Mr. Darby Allin. Now this starts off as we got Mr. John Silver's power versus Mr. Darby Allin's speed, but we actually see Mr. Darby Allin going technical route, and we go hold for hold in the beginning, up until we get a huge European uppercut from Mr. John Silver, knocking Darby Allin outside the ring. Now we see literally John Silver throw this man across the ring on 3 different occasions. We also see him go for a nice running knee strike in the corner and leading into a brainbuster for a near fall. Now, as we come back from the break, we actually see that John Silver has brought out Darby Allin onto the ringside area. And as he goes for a huge move going into the barricade, Darby moves out of the way and he misses going over the barricade. Now, this brings alarm to all the Dark Order members, and Ryan Reynolds actually helps him over. And as he goes back into the ringside area, Darby actually looks to hit a tope suicida, but hits number 5 instead. And that leaves John Silver to clean him out in the ringside area on the floor, and then brings it back in the ring. Now, as all of this confusion is going on with the Dark Order members, we actually see Sting come out with the bat to even out the odds. Now, as they go, and they actually go hold for a little while again, and we actually see the raining of kicks from John Silver, and we also see a nice call to his Dark Order member, Miss Anna Jay, for he goes for the Queen Slayer sleeper hold, and then we actually see him get in a nice little amount of offense, but we also see more near falls as we actually see Darby Allin roll to the outside, but of course John Silver meets him out there and rains with some more kicks for this man, and even brings it back in the ring and does it even more. And then we see these two go to the corner of the ring, and these two just are trading strikes hand to hand. Is remarkable to see. And then we actually see Darby Allin and John Silver on the top turnbuckle, where Darby actually knocks John Silver off, and he goes for a huge coffin drop on the Dark Order on the outside of the ring. Now, as Darby gets back onto the top rope, we actually see John Silver meet him back up there, and he hits this nice, remarkable move on the off the top rope. And as he goes for a cover on Darby, Darby actually gets the rope break when John Silver uses too much momentum in this cover over Darby. Now he goes for the Brody power bomb but he ends up getting reversed as Darby hits the code red for a huge win in his title retention. Now, after the match, we see Sting, Darby Allin, and John Silver show respect to one another, but this, of course, brings out Matt Hardy as he takes out Darby Allin from the outside. And this brings out Matt Hardy Empire, and this also brings out the Dark Order, and we see an all-out brawl between Darby and Sting, the Dark Order, and Matt Hardy Empire going off into the show. Now, what a show. This was a show filled with amazing action from start to finish. I was extremely happy with what the guys brought today. But as usual, this had to come to an end. It was a nice, aimless place where we actually saw great action. We saw a nice starting match with Kenny Omega versus Matt Sydal. Then we saw a nice middle match with a great 6-man tag of the Young Bucks and Brandon Cutler versus the Lucha Bros and Laredo Kid. And a nice ending with a phenomenal main event for the TNT Championship. Now, without further ado, of course, check out the rest of this week's videos that we have uploaded so far. Of course, there's the Raw recap from Asante Grundy. I heard NXT was huge, as we got huge news going into Stand and Deliver with Walter getting challenged for the NXT UK Championship by an NXT superstar, not from NXT UK. But you guys, in order to know that news, you got to check out Jordan's NXT recap. But until next time, I'll be back with you guys for the SmackDown recap this weekend. But I'm Kevin Jones, the Disciples of Wrestling, and that was wrestling.